Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to meet you all. And today I really would like to talk a lot about EQ and why it's the most critical skill. What I wanted to just show you is this is the book that I've written. It's available on Amazon and it's called Brain-Based Emotional Intelligence for Kids. So many of the concepts that I'm going to be talking about today actually are coming from this book. It's an interactive book. And I just wanted to really quickly showcase that. I teach classes at San Jose State, like was mentioned in my bio, but I also teach enrichment classes in EQ through the City of Dublin and various communities and organizations that request me to come. But parents can also do this at home with their children. So today we'll really look at what can you do at home. And I have step-by-step guidelines because many parents were saying that, you know, they couldn't take my classes, but they really wanted to encourage learning EQ at home with their kids. So I have activities that you can do at home. I'm gonna be talking about the mind jar today, so I thought I'd show that to you. And because I've been a teacher for LA Unified School District, I try to make everything I do with kids really fun. I have games in this book in the back that children can play. The one thing that I won't talk about today is brain-based, but I wanted just to show you that the reason I talk about the brain is because it empowers children to understand what exactly is going on inside of them when they're stressed, when they're feeling really big emotions. And so in my book, I do talk a lot about this amygdala and having that be that reaction, that OMG reaction, something is happening to me when I have to give a presentation in front of my peers, or when a friend says something really mean to me. What does that mean? Like, why is my body reacting in this way? And I blurt out something that I didn't even mean to say. And so we really talk about what is a real threat, what is a perceived threat, which most of what's happening with them in schools oftentimes is a perceived threat. A real threat would be something like a car that's about to hit them. We do a lot of things like comic strips, what's happening to the body, like when you're sweating, when your heart is racing, when you feel like you're gonna throw up. And the rest of this, again, I'll address, just because the video is on right now, I wanted just to let you see some of these things. But journaling, we're gonna talk about why is that so important to train your brain about what's happening in your body. We're gonna be looking at something called mind bubbles, but this is the image I want you to think about when you think about the mind bubbles. We'll also be looking at today's talk, vision board. So I do have something related to how to create a vision board in here. And now I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet? Okay, hold on, let me see.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so today, again, we're looking at why EQ is the most critical skill and what parents really need to know. And it's very, very critical, again, because what it's gonna help your children with is personal and professional fulfillment in their lives and success. So when you know more about yourself, you're able to then tune into, you know, what do you wanna do in your life? It's gonna really help you meet those developmental milestones for your children. So we'll look at that. We're gonna look at making and keeping good friends, understanding what healthy relationships are about, understanding how to work collaboratively in groups and teams. And today, more than ever, we're gonna need it to progress in our careers. As artificial intelligence is replacing many of the jobs and skills we have, the one thing it cannot replace is, you know, having EQ. And just personally speaking, you know, it's really helped me out in my career. As a professor, I'm able to notice when a student is not understanding something just based on facial expressions, like if they're scrunching their face a certain way. I'm able to then see that, okay, the students are not understanding this. If they're yawning, if they're looking tired, I'm able to bring in a case study. I'll say, let's go ahead and do this situation, a real life situation right now, and really dissect that. And so again, my reviews have come out wonderful for my students. They say I'm very approachable because I also know, and I tell my students this all the time, when you're in new settings, when you start school and you're changing periods in 6th grade or in middle school or high school, when you go with your parents to a social event, if you want people to talk to you and you don't know them well, smiling is like the best thing to do because that is giving them a social cue as to that you're approachable. You're someone that wants to talk versus scrunching your face, putting like the hoodie over your head, being on your phone, not really making that eye contact. So these are things that we really want to look at when we're thinking about EQ. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. Okay, so what is emotional intelligence? Let's go ahead and define it first. And so there's 5 pillars to emotional intelligence. And the first 3 that you're seeing there, it's developing self-awareness. So again, that insight about yourself. What do you like? What are you passionate about? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses or areas of development? Identifying and managing emotions. So the research actually shows that parents oftentimes don't talk a lot about emotions. So children typically have like a couple words that they use. Are you happy? Are you sad? Why are you mad? But like I said in the book that I have, we really are looking at, are you disappointed? Are you irritated? Are you jealous? Are you lonely? What exactly is going on? And then if you're showing some of those big emotions, like if you're feeling a lot of anger, if your amygdala is hijacked, and that's the term I use in my class, what are some strategies that you have? What are your coping tools? Because you don't want to have a tantrum at work. You don't want to get frustrated and decide one day you're just going to quit because your report wasn't chosen. And we need to start teaching those skills early on in their lives. The third one is being self-motivated, right? So making sure that you are, those people have a happier disposition in life. They have a positive mindset. They're excited to be at school. They're excited to be at work. They know why they're going to school. And this is where those vision boards are going to be so important. And the last 2 there, so the first 3 were intrapersonal, within ourselves. The last 2, showing empathy and handling social relationships, again, have to do with the interpersonal skills. And those are the skills you need when you start working with people, when you start managing people. So we're going to see that as you progress in your career, also to make good friends, to make authentic connections with people. How do you handle conflicts, conflict resolution? That's all going to be in 4 and 5. So now this is the one skill that is not taught in schools because it is difficult to teach. So some of the things that I talked to you about were like reading facial expressions, body language, tuning into somebody else's mood, their emotion, evaluating how they're feeling. So this is a lot more complex. But what happened is in the 1800s, there was a common school movement where the public schools took over most of the academic subjects, right? Before, parents were teaching actually everything until public schools came and emerged. And then the school said, okay, we're going to teach you about the subject matter, which has a lot more to do with the IQ, like the quantitative reasoning, spatial intelligence, analyzing patterns. So they're teaching them a lot of what's already happening with IQ. But what employers are finding is that not everyone has EQ. And so what employers are saying is that we hire for EQ because we can always train for IQ. So they can always train for what exactly they need the employee to do. But what's harder to find is someone that has higher EQ. And schools are having a difficult time teaching it because, again, it's so varied, it's so complex, and it's so nuanced. And what we're also seeing is that many parents, especially in the Asian community, Indian American parents, they're so focused on the academics, which is again related more to the IQ, that they're not really focusing in as much on the EQ. And this is something, again, I was born and raised here. And so I understand this. Like my parents really did focus in on the education, making sure we were academically successful, wanting us to be financially successful, like achieving that American dream. But one takeaway that I want parents to have today is that children really need to feel like they have one parent on their side that they can go to when they're having a problem with a friend, when they weren't invited to a birthday party and they're feeling really sad about it. And they want to talk to someone that shows that true, authentic connection, and what that means. What does that look like? Because the quote that I have up here really speaks to how all of this is connected. So the academic, social, and emotional development is all connected. So if a child is having a stressor in their lives, like if they got embarrassed at school and they're feeling down about themselves, what you're going to see is that their grades are going to drop because they're not, or they feel like they don't have good friends at school. It's all connected. So we want to make sure, and here's the quote here, research shows that poor EQ skills are associated with depression, anxiety, poor academic performance, aggression, drug abuse, destructive peer relationships, and poor physical and psychological health. So for the development of the whole child, we really do need parents to focus in on what's happening with their child every day. Like, what are their moods like? Do they understand their moods? And getting your children to tell you, because I often hear from parents that, maybe their child isn't opening up to them. And so that's also something that, again, I can address with parents. This is also important because there's actually a book written out there that is about parents holding on. So the title is called Parents Hold On to Your Children, Why Parents Need to Matter More Than Their Peers. Because again, if you're not getting this type of advice from your parents about, what do I do? Like when, my friend is not talking to me anymore, or this girl told me not to talk to this other girl and I still like her as a friend, then they're getting advice from their peers. And what we're seeing is that we need more vertical mentors in the lives of children, vertical meaning adults that have a lot of life experiences and wisdom, versus horizontal advice from their peers, because they don't really have, obviously, the experience and all the wisdom that somebody older would have. So it's almost like the blind leading the blind. You're not sure exactly, and that kind of happened to me. Like, I would go to my peers for advice about these types of things. So I know that this is very, very important. And to start this, again, from a young age is going to be important. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, where I want us to take a look at the ages and stages, because parenting should be changing based on the ages and stages of the child, because there's going to be different needs that need to be met. Now, the first thing I have there is something from Erickson, who has a theory. It's a life stage theory that goes from infancy all the way through death. I'm only showing you a couple of these stages. And what it looks at is that each child has a psychological conflict in their social environment. So it's called psychosocial conflict. And in the preschool years, that psychosocial conflict is initiative versus guilt. So is it okay for me to do or act? So when they get to preschool, oftentimes they're trying out new things. They're being exposed to a lot more of their kids their age, because before that they were probably at home. They had siblings that may have been different ages. Now they're getting to see peers their age and learning what is appropriate and inappropriate in terms of how to act with them. Like not taking a toy away when they want to play with it, but using their words and asking, can I have a turn with that after you're done? Sharing manners, eye contact, saying hello, saying thank you, please, welcome. All of that is really, really important, but also, again, identifying and managing those emotions. A lot of times in preschool, again, parents will hear that a child, was biting or like bit another child because they didn't get their way. So really being able to start those conversations early on in a child's life is going to be really important. We then move into the school age years, where the psychosocial conflict is industry versus inferiority. So this is where they feel like, am I good at something? Can I make it in this world? And they're comparing themselves to their peers a lot. It's a lot of black and white. If they see that a peer is really good at art, then all of a sudden they think that they're not artists. They see somebody else that's really good at basketball. They think, oh, well, maybe I'm not a basketball player then. And this is where you really want to parent with a growth mindset and really show them that everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And if you want to develop something, you can. It's not fixed. You can grow it. And it just takes, hard work. It takes practice. It takes effort. So having those conversations early, because you don't want them to, in their minds, all of a sudden make this judgment and then just think, well, that's not me. And I see this a lot with kids, they all of a sudden start labeling themselves. Well, I'm a shy person. I don't do that. And that's not something you want. You don't want them to be labeling themselves, well, I'm not into math. That's not my subject. This early on in their lives. You really want them to feel like they have the resources to really go for what they want to, and they have the support because of these conversations you're having with them. And you're also going to see, again, they're going to get into the peer conflicts, and active listening is something I really recommend. And there's, again, another book that I want to bring to your attention, and it's How to Listen So Your Kids Will Talk, and Talk so your kids will listen. And it really talks about just sort of listening, not judging them, accepting what they're saying. It doesn't mean you agree with them, but you're allowing them to talk and not jump in right away and say, oh, don't say that word, or don't talk like that. But really, like, well, exactly what are you saying? Just rephrasing it, reframing what they're saying. Is this what you're trying to tell me? And there's a lot that goes into that. So there's usually like a separate workshop that you would have to do just on how do you practice this active listening with your child. But again, that book has great strategies for how to do this. The next one I want to look at is adolescence, because what's going on in adolescence is they're trying to form their own identities. And sometimes if they don't have that, if they don't have things that they're good at, they have a lot of role confusion. So who am I? What can I be in this world? And so they also are trying to individuate from the family system at this age, which is why those conversations during the school age years is so important, because when they get to adolescence, they actually sometimes want to separate and say, well, this is how my family's always done it, but I'm not sure if that's me. So let me try something completely different. And that's why, again, adolescents, like you'll see them dyeing their hair a certain color, getting piercings, just doing different things. Some parents tell me that their child, you know, all of a sudden doesn't want to go to like the religious organization that they typically go to every weekend. They're saying, we don't want to go anymore. They're just trying to figure out like what exactly, you know, do they like, what do they want to be away from the family system? It's their way to explore. Sometimes, again, this is where they engage in risky behavior and peer pressure. But if you've had conversations with them early on about values and beliefs and your family's worldviews during the school age years in particular, when they get to adolescence, they have a good understanding of that. And so they have an internal locus of control, is what they call it, where they understand why they believe in what they believe. And at this age, I often tell parents to use hypothetical situations. Like, what would you do in this scenario? Like if your friends were pressuring you to do something that you didn't want to do, try something you didn't want to try. Let's talk about it. What do you say to them? Because this is really important. Sometimes children, the research has shown, they just don't know what to say. They've never been taught. They have no idea how to say no, that power of no, in a nice way. They want to be polite. They don't want to lose friends. So that, again, is going to be really important. So from personal to professional fulfillment and success. Again, like I said, EQ is something that you're going to need even more as you move up in your career. EQ is going to become more important. And there's a quote here from a corporation that looked at how when people are in positions of power, it is even more necessary to be able to control their emotions and to steer difficult situations towards positive outcomes. And people that have high EQ, these are some of the characteristics that are on the slide. They have a positive mindset and attitude at work. Again, they're excited to be there. They understand what the job that they want to do. They don't resent the work that they're doing. They're happy to be doing it. They're better at motivating themselves and others, taking on those leadership positions, getting other people excited about this new initiative or project at work. They're better at working on teams. They have more insight into their own capabilities. They can manage their emotions and moods, so people rely on them. They depend on them. They feel like they're more approachable. And then again, they can navigate those difficult situations towards more positive outcomes. And there's a couple of studies I wanted to mention here where one study found that individuals with strong EQs were more likely to succeed than those with higher IQs or relevant work experience. Again, speaking to that importance of EQ versus sometimes IQ or even work experience, the Center for Creative Leadership found that executives fail in their careers because they do not have high EQ and have trouble with interpersonal relationships and working in teams. So again, when you move up, you become a manager, you're working with a lot of different people. So the types of skills you have are going to be really important. And then a survey by Career Builder looked at 70% of employers say they value EQ over IQ. Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. And now I'm just going to kind of dissect a couple of those, all of the 5 pillars really that we looked at earlier on when we defined it. But how to identify emotions. So again, the research shows that the happiest people in life can explain how they're feeling, drawing on as many as 20 to 30 words. So it is very, very important to be able to identify your feelings. And on my slide there, you can see how many different ways there are to say sad. So instead of saying sad, really being able to help them understand, are they depressed? Do they feel heavy or crushed or disgusted? Weepy, frustrated, right? So checking in with your child, what's going on inside is really important. There's lots of different books about emotion. So again, the early ages, preschool, school age. I just read a book in my daughter's class from Project Cornerstone that I teach in there. The book was Today I Feel Silly and Other Moods That Make My Day by Jamie Lee Curtis. The kids loved it. It had a little wheel in the back that you could change and like change the emotions and talk about, well, when do you feel silly? And, you know, and then when do you feel like this? And just build their emotional vocabulary. Help them understand that mind-body connection. So in my class, we talk a lot about how sometimes when you're hungry, you're going to be more cranky. So what is something that you can do? Like when you're hungry, well, get a snack. Don't wait for your parents to tell you that you should eat now. You know, do that. When you're tired, so we talk about how Mondays are sometimes difficult because of the weekend and maybe having a different sleep schedule. And so they start understanding these concepts and then build it into your daily lives. So at dinner, you know, like with my kids, we talk about like, what are your highs today? What were your lows today? Was it sort of just like an okay day? To really check in and see like, well, what was the high about today? Like what was exciting? You know, why was there a low? Like what happened there? And so we're able to then talk about these things and see that every single one of us is going to have a different high, a different low. So building out that insight into oneself. How to manage those big emotions. When a big emotion takes over, what coping strategies do your kids have? Deep breathing, we practice this in my class, and it's different from shallow breathing, right? So I tell the students, like, you breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. It has to be longer when you're breathing out through the mouth. And they start realizing that that's the one way you're calming down that amygdala part of your brain, and all of a sudden your body starts feeling calmer. I talk to them about noticing their mind bubbles. So that's an activity that we actually do in here, where there's bubbles like this, and we actually play with bubbles as well, but then we also look at this and how some bubbles are going to be bigger. Like some days, like you have a test coming up and that bubble in your brain is really big with test because you're having a lot of anxiety about that test, or a friend that you think maybe doesn't want to be your friend anymore. And so I want them to notice that those are things that are happening in their minds, and eventually every bubble pops, so they know this as well. And the other one is a mind jar. I have a picture of 2 mind jars that I've created I've done a lesson in a classroom where they wanted just one with a water bottle so it doesn't break. In my classes, we do the glass ones, but that glitter is your amygdala that is reacting. And then we do deep breathing. And as we do deep breathing, the glitter starts to settle. And then they realize that now you could go ahead and make that decision, right? Instead of just being so reactive, you get mad, you make a decision that maybe you regret later. And as you get older, again, this is gonna help you in your professional lives. Sometimes with my students, they email me about something that I've already told them in class, or, you know, things like that, where I give myself 24 hours. You know, I'm like, I'm not gonna react, I'm not gonna actually email today. I'm gonna email tomorrow. And again, you have a new perspective the next day, instead of right away emailing something that you're going to regret later. Journaling feelings. So journaling feelings is so important because this is just data about you. So we have journals that I have them do, especially when they're having negative emotions, because then what they start realizing is that, wait, I keep getting negative emotions when with my sibling, right? So that happens in my house. Like a lot of times they're frustrated with their sibling or expectations. So some students have noticed that they have high expectations, and when their expectations aren't met, they get very frustrated. So as they start journaling, their prefrontal cortex is getting stronger, and it's understanding that, okay, you had an expectation, it didn't get met, but it doesn't let your amygdala get hijacked. So the more they journal, the more they're realizing that prefrontal cortex, which is a smarter part of the brain, is acknowledging what's happening, and the amygdala then cannot take over. Changing the channel. So yoga is great for this. Doing something else completely, like something that you like. So exercising gives off endorphins. Any activity or hobby that they enjoy doing, whether it's walking, just walking around the neighborhood, biking, meditation, or saying mantras to really calm the mind down. The strategy that we use in my class is called stop. So I tell them to stop whatever they're doing, go, if you're at school, go to the bathroom, take that deep breath that we talked about. Think about the mind bubbles that are coming up in your mind and popping. And then go ahead and proceed with what do you do next now that you've let those big emotions pass with the deep breathing. Being self-motivated. So it's going to be really important to provide your children with opportunities to try, again, a wide range of activities, because in the school age years, they're in that industry versus inferiority, which means if they don't find something they're good at, they're going to feel inferior to all their peers. What types of activities, do they do on their own? Can they spend hours doing where they just get lost in it? That will give you some idea of what are their interests. Provide them with the right type of environment by exposing them to all of these ideas, activities, and concepts. Again, like I said, parent with a growth mindset. In my house every day, I ask them, what is one thing you did well? Like, what were they excited about that they felt that they were really good at? So after talking about highs and lows, we talk about what did you do well? We talk about what are you grateful for? But we also talk about what mistake did you make today? Because if you're not making mistakes, you're not growing. So I don't want them to just sit in their comfort zone. I want them to get a little uncomfortable. And, being comfortable with the uncomfortable is, a term we use all the time. And what you can see there in that PowerPoint is a visual representation of goals that, students have. So we make vision boards in my class, and some students put their college on there. This student, this is not one that my student made, but, it says health and fitness, family dinners, school. So it's a reminder, why are they going to school? Why are they doing these things? And again, that really does motivate them and keep them self-motivated to continue. Because right now, again, it's so easy to get distracted by the phone. If you have teenagers, they're constantly checking it. But again, letting them see that that's instant gratification. We need to, really focus in on the things that will matter most in our lives, which is oftentimes delayed gratification. The last two that we're looking at here have to do with those interpersonal skills. So empathy and handling social relationships. Now, there's definitely a difference between sympathy versus empathy. So sympathy sometimes is that idea of your child says something to you like, oh, I had to give this presentation. It was, I was so scared. I was shaking. And then the parent goes, well, at least it was only for 10 minutes. If I said that, I would say, I have to lecture for an hour and 20 minutes, for every section that I teach. So at least yours was just 10 minutes. So it's not really connecting with them. So what you want to do is really show empathy by making those authentic connections. Take their perspective. Oh, I remember when I was in school, I felt the same way. I was very self-conscious. And so it shows that you're really caring without judgment. So you don't want to judge your child based on what they're saying, or what, maybe you don't feel that empathy, you don't want to feel that you don't feel empathy towards them. If they say, oh, I was really hungry, and you're like, well, I packed you all these snacks, why didn't you eat them? And then they say, well, I dropped it. Well, you could have just picked it up and had a couple of bites, things like that, where you're sometimes like, well, I don't understand it all. So, figure it out, but really trying to get in there with them. And the second point there is engaging in healthy relationships. So in my class, I do a traffic light activity where I try to teach them, who are green light friends that allow for you to sometimes, that encourage you, that let you choose activities, and they choose activities sometimes, where a warning friend is someone who sometimes criticizes you or makes fun of you, or it could be a red light friend. So I tell them, this is a friend that usually makes all the decisions. What kind of friend is that to you? Is that a warning friend? They don't really let you pick anything. Sometimes they let you pick. So we talk about authentic relationships, and not just being friends with someone just because they're giving you something. So, things like that. And then healthy conflict resolution. So how do you deal with conflict? Some people, even adults, sometimes they want to escape it. They avoid it. They don't want to address it. So how do we do that in a constructive way, and really listen to both sides of the situation and take another person's perspective, which takes a lot, because a lot of times when someone's telling you that you did something wrong, the first thing is you want to get defensive. And then how to de-escalate versus escalate. So waiting for the right time or moment, saying I'm going to table this right now. We're not going to talk about it because emotions are high. Let's come back to this tomorrow, or let's meet at a coffee shop another day. Things like that. So understanding when a situation is escalating and you're yelling and you're, mimicking exactly the other person's temperament and it's getting really heated, versus just saying, we're going to leave this for now. I'm not going to talk about this right now. So the last thing I just wanted to go over with you was your role. So social learning theory really looks at how children are learning the most from what you do, not what you say, right? So making sure that you yourself are showing them how you have high EQ as well, or are working on your EQ skills. So first, prioritizing it at home. We talked a lot about just like at dinners, checking in with them. What is their high? What is their low? Tell me one thing that happened with somebody else, not you, but is any of your friends having any issues at school? And typically, again, my kids will start telling me about other things that are happening, which we then use as teachable moments to talk about, well, what would you do in these situations? Using my workbook again, if you can't go to my classes, I am talking to Yoga Bharati about, getting the children these books. But, brain-based EQ, again, you could do this at home with your children to expose them to many of these concepts. Model. So I do this as well at home. So when I'm, again, in a mood, so identifying and managing my own emotions, so like what strategies am I using? So sometimes I'll tell my children, you know what, like I can't talk about this right now because I feel like my amygdala is hijacked and I need some time right now. So I'm leaving. And it doesn't mean that, they feel like, oh, mom's not coming back to this. She's not talking about it. She's mad. She doesn't want to see me anymore. But just acknowledging to them that I need some time right now. I'm feeling very frustrated. And those I statements are very powerful. So when parents say, I feel frustrated when you jump on the couch, that helps them understand that feeling that, maybe they think jumping on the couch is really fun. And a lot of times what parents do is say, you stop it, you stop jumping on the couch, you don't do this. But when you start identifying your emotion, like I feel really annoyed when you talk really loud, when I'm on the phone, that really gets to them. Like you're identifying all these words for them, having a calm down area in your home. So I have, mind jars all throughout my house because I make them for my classes and I just have a lot of them. So when I'm really upset, sometimes my children will tell me, they'll say, go use your mind jar. And I do, and so I tell them I'm going to go use the mind jar, and then I sit there, watch that, let myself calm down before again engaging. Using those active listening skills. Now this strategy is again really difficult to do because parents are so busy and they have to get through dinner, they have to get through homework, and sometimes children again can talk. So have a scheduled time to use active listening. For me, a lot of times when I'm walking home with my kids after school, I say, I'm going to put that active listening hat on and I'm not going to interject or tell them my opinion, but just keep asking them questions. Like, well, why did that happen? Why do you think that happened with, your friend? And just kind of mimic what they're saying, ask questions, summarize what they're saying. But again, don't tell your own story. Don't give them advice at that time. Just be there to listen. And parent with that growth mindset to really empower them to keep learning and growing to their fullest potential. Children have the most confidence when they take those risks. The research shows this. And so again, just encourage them, tell them. So when we do the mistakes, like what mistake did you make? I always model that I made a mistake. So I always tell them, this is the mistake I made, but I did learn so much from it. So that way they're actually excited to make mistakes. They don't feel like, oh, I did a bad thing, but okay, yes, I can share it at dinner with mom and dad. And that means that I'm growing and I'm developing and I'm learning. So it's great. And I think that is, yes, all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I love talking about this stuff. And I will hand it over to Savita, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Amita. It was a wonderful discussion. And for next maybe 5 minutes or so, if we have any questions, we can take up.
Hi, Dr. Amita. My name is Biti Saroya. Can you please explain the concept of mind jar? What a mind jar is?
Yes, so a mind jar is about 20% clear glue, and then the rest of it, you know, the 80% is water. And you kind of can play around with it to see. The clear glue is what keeps the glitter, you know, just in the jar and just floating in the jar. And what people use it for is that when you get upset, you know, you go to that jar, you shake it, like, and so it's releasing that energy that you're feeling within your body. And so you're shaking it, shaking it, shaking it. And then all the glitter that's there is like the amygdala of your brain. That's what they say. And that amygdala has kind of been hijacked. So you're watching the glitter and you're doing the deep breathing. And then the glitter just slowly starts to settle as you're doing your deep breathing practice. I tell students to also just imagine like all those mind bubbles, like we talked about, like as the glitter is coming down and settling down. And that's when the jar is completely clear, that is when children are then ready to make a decision about what to do next. Because that means your prefrontal cortex has stepped in, which is the smart part of your brain that helps you make good decisions. And so that's something that you can Google, and they have lots of different ways. Some people put like stars along with the glitter. They put stars, so it kind of keeps the children more engaged, looking for that star. And with the Where's Waldo, in my class we use food coloring to change the color of the clear glue. My daughter uses it as her wind down routine. So at night, and we don't use it just when she's angry, but we use it just for her to kind of think about the thoughts that are coming to her at nighttime. And maybe she's anxious about something the next day, and I tell her like, what's in your mind right now? So as the glitter's going down, she's explaining to me that I wonder if this friend is going to talk to me tomorrow, and I wonder if I'm going to wake up in a good mood because it's Monday, you know. So she'll say stuff like that while we're watching the mind jar.
Dr. Amita?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Savita. And I actually texted you a question on the group chat. I'm not sure if you're looking at it, but basically I can just read it out.
Sure.
I was curious if you could, I was just wondering if you could speak to how acculturative stresses cause issues for parents and children, the intergenerational conflict, and how that impacts EQ and self-esteem in both children and parents, and how do we address that? Thank you.
So so acculturated stress, what do you mean? So just like accumulated stress on the child?
Well, the parents actually, as parents, we actually do face a lot of acculturative stresses in terms of the losses we incur in moving away from our families and our country, and not being able to live in communities or cultures or practice our religion the way we are used to. So that's a cumulative stress. Plus microaggressions, experiences of racism, discrimination, or any kind of misunderstandings of people from other cultures, or even the dominant group, the dominant population. And that has been known to add to a lot of anxiety and depression in immigrants, and that can affect EQ considerably, and also affect the basically relationships between parents and children. I love that you quoted Gabor Mate's book, Hold On to Your Kids, which speaks to that quite a bit, in terms of the attachment rupture between parents and children. I was just wondering if you could touch on mainly just the acculturative stresses to bring some awareness to that, because most parents are not even aware of their acculturative stresses.
Yeah, so I teach, one of the classes I teach is contemporary parenting at San Jose State. And we really do look at stress on parents and how that impacts their own parenting style. And so what you're also looking at is just the stress that's come from moving again from India to America and losing all your support and resources and like the grandparents, the religion, and then how do you hold on to that while your children are growing up in the US and they're being raised in a completely different culture. And maybe acquiring different value systems completely. And, parents are then trying to figure out how do we address this like cultural and generational gap that's occurring. Children sometimes also feel like parents don't understand them because they haven't gone to school in the US. And then it becomes a little bit more difficult to then have those conversations as well. The second thing you talked about was like racism and discrimination. I think that also has to do with the different communities that we live in. So when I grew up, I was one of the only Indians. I grew up in Walnut Creek and was raised there. And so I definitely dealt with a lot of stereotypes. And this is why EQ is so important for me, is to be able to make sure that children are not bullied or stereotyped or called names, things like that. But again, what I'm seeing today is that there's a lot more, like I live in Dublin, and there's a majority of the families that are here today are Indian or Asian, and we actually are more of the dominant culture. So I think that's gonna, we'll have to look at that based on each community that you're a part of and what individuals are experiencing. But absolutely it plays in a very important role in EQ and academics and relating to one another and knowing when to stand up for yourself. A lot of Asian parents teach their children like the staying away tactic, like just stay away from those types of situations and everything will be okay. But in the US, we're learning to be an upstander, not a bystander. So you stand up, you speak up, you talk to the right people in the right channels. You create campaigns around what that issue is, right? If there's a microaggression happening, you address it, you bring it to the school, you talk to individuals about what is that microaggression. Right now there's the coronavirus, and I know there's been a lot of stereotyping around that. So schools are addressing it. They're writing letters to parents. They're making sure that children are aware of this. But, again, with conversations, that's how that can occur. Going back to the stress piece of it, I think it's also really important for parents to have support. So family resilience is only built by connecting to other families. So having a community like this, like with Yoga Bharati or with your own neighbors, and really feeling that support as a family is going to be really important as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, wonderful, Dr. Amita. This is we just another couple of minutes and we can end the session. I know it's been the late hour of the day, almost end of the day. So excellent talk and presentation, Dr. Amita. There were a lot of, it was packed, but there were a lot of things that you kind of brought up as a food for thought for many of the parents here on the, we had about 27 people.
Oh, wow, great.
Few people, yeah, just might have logged off at the end of the day, but so it's a combination of we have our own yoga teachers, yoga therapy teachers, and also the parents from our kids classes